it's live. So that means Monday, Tuesday, you'll be here, and then, well, Rishab Dave comes back on Monday, but then they leave again on Thursday. So, all right.
That'll be good.
Yeah, I mean, and they're here. Everybody looking through the Facebook live, they're also here. We will continue. We will continue. Today is discussion of Ram Vijayotsava from Srila Bhaktivigyan Bharati Goswami Maharaj, and also Srila Madhvacharya's appearance day. Or disappearance, I forget. Yeah. And one more. Swarup Damodar Maharaj, our revered godbrother.
His disappearance.
His disappearance, yes, just before beginning of Kartik. So, I was reading. There's so much nectar. So much nectar. All right. Ajnanatirandasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshurun militam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha. Mukam karoti vachalam pangam langayate girim yat kripa tamaham vande shri gurun dinataranam. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo mahabhadanyaya krishna prema pradayate krishnaya krishna chaitanya namne gaura tvishe namah. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha. Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. First of all, I offer my unlimited Dandavat pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Gurudev, Nitya Lila Pravishta, Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa, Ashtotar Sata Shri Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada. And then I'm offering my same unlimited Dandavat pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Siksha Gurudevs, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa, Ashto Tarasata Shri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj, and Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa, Ashto Tarasata Shri Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. My Dandavat pranams to all of my Sri Rupa Nuga Guru Varga. My Dandavat pranams to all the Vaishnavas and all the Vaishnavis. Yes, so on my email came the usual articles on different appearance and disappearance days by Srila Bhaktivedanta Bharati Goswami Maharaj. So I was reading that, and I tried to put it on here from my phone because we're using that phone. So I'll see if I did succeed. Some of it couldn't be downloaded. Let's see. Okay, so we have the Srila Madhvacharya. First we'll do Sri Madhvacharya because today is the disappearance day of, wait, no, it says the appearance day. But the thing is, on the calendar it's the disappearance day. Wait a minute, no. Following is an excerpt of a Bhav Anuvad of the Katha given by Srila Bhaktivedanta Bharati Goswami Maharaj on the disappearance day of Sri Madhvacharya in 2017, February 5th. Today is the appearance day, yes. And Vijaya Dashami is the name of the celebration of the victory of Lord Ramchandra over Ravana, Kumbhakarna, and Meghanath, and the whole armies of Ravana. So sometimes it's called Sri Ram Vijay Utsava, victory celebration, Vijay Utsava. It's also called Ram Vijaya Dashami, because there were 10 days where lamps were offered. Anyway, we'll read about it. But what I have here is the for the appearance day of Sri Madhvacharya. We are going to read that first. I also downloaded something from Google, quite a nice presentation of a lot of more of the activities. This is somewhat brief, what he's giving here, but a lot of more childhood and also sannyas, early sannyas and later sannyas. His pastimes, Madhvacharya's. Also about his philosophy. It's very interesting. And of course, why is Sri Madhvacharya so important to us? Because Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted his line. So we are the Sri Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, known as Brahma Madhva. So why are we Brahma Madhva? Because Lord Brahma is the original guru of this Sampradaya. It is coming down from Lord Brahma, and from Brahma to Narada. He is the disciple of Lord Brahma and the son of Lord Brahma, Narada Muni. Then Narada Muni became the guru of Srila Krishna Dvaipayana Veda Vyasadeva. And that is explained in the 5th chapter of the 1st canto. In the very beginning of the Bhagavatam. It's actually the first pastime being expressed in the whole Srimad Bhagavatam of Narada and Vyasa and their conversation. How Narada Muni could detect that Vyasadeva was not satisfied even after writing all the Vedic literatures. He still wasn't satisfied, and then that conversation ensued where Narada descended from the skies into his ashram in the Himalayan mountains, and he was honored and greeted and worshipped by Vyasadeva, and then immediately Narada began to express to Vyasadeva and telling him that, why are you so undone? That's the word Prabhupada uses. You know? So, anyway, then Sri Narada Muni, he also told about his previous life, how he was the son of a maidservant, and by serving and the association of the Bhakti Vedantas, Prabhupada says, great Maha-Bhagavat Vaishnavas came and stayed in the ashram for 4 months of the rainy season. And therefore, Narada, who was a boy then, he got their association. So just imagine, the whole Srimad Bhagavatam starts out with sadhusanga. Sadhusanga. First of all, sages, and they're associating with who? Sutta Goswami. Sutta Goswami begins to speak, and then he begins to tell the pastime of how Srimad Bhagavatam came to be written. Because Sutta Goswami was there in the assembly when Shukadev Goswami spoke. And also, Srila Vyasadeva was also there. He's the author of the Srimad Bhagavatam, but he was also there listening in that assembly. So how is it that Madhvacharya is the next person in the disciplic succession after Brahma and Narada and Vyas? Madhvacharya then. How many years went by? How many centuries went by before Madhvacharya became the disciple of Srila Vyasadeva? This was only 800 years ago when Madhvacharya was on the planet. And the conversation of Narada and Vyasadeva is more than 5,000 years ago, right? So how did it happen that Madhvacharya became the disciple of Srila Vyasadeva? Do you know that story? No?
No.
Did he
actually meet him?
He actually went to the Himalayan mountains, bounding up the mountains. There was another disciple who was also accompanying him, but he got left behind because Madhvacharya's incarnation of a combination of Bhima and Hanuman. And Hanuman is also an expansion of Lord Shiva, right? And Bhim is the son of Vayu, the wind god. So Bhim was extremely strong, and Hanuman was also able to fly in the air and do any kind of seva, right? So as Madhvacharya, he had all these different special powers and extreme strength as well. So he went up, up, up into the, what's it called, Badarik Ashram, and Srila Vyasadeva, who's still there, by the way, he hasn't gone from the planet. Just like Parashuram is still on the planet also. Yes, Parashuram. So he went, and at one point his disciple got left behind because Madhvacharya started to leap, bounding up, up, up. And he came there. And Srila Vyasadeva came and greeted him. And then Sri Madhvacharya, he had the association and the blessings of Vyasadeva and received also Diksha from him, Siksha also. Not only that, but Madhvacharya had written a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, his own commentary. And he read that to Srila Vyasadeva, and Vyasa said, yes, very good. So that's why Brahma, Narada, Vyas, Madhvacharya.
Did Madhvacharya introduce like the conjugal ras into the...
That's Madhvacharya.
No, he didn't fully introduce, but guess what? In one of the articles I was reading, Madhvacharya is a gopi in Krishna's eternal pastimes. You know what his name, the gopi's name is?
Narada?
Yes.
Really? I guess I know.
Yes. Yes. That's correct. Good guess. Yes. So I was very fortunate to go to Udupi. Have you been ever? No. Udupi is such a wonderful place in South India. And it's right near the ocean. It's only about 10 miles from the ocean, the town of Udupi. And to this day, this is 800 years later, the Krishna deity, he's known as Udupi Krishna. And Madhvacharya received that deity. You know how that deity came? It came on a boat that was carrying cargo from Dwarka. It came on the boat from Dwarka. Got stuck at that place right near, and Madhvacharya was there on the shore at that time. He hadn't yet established his ashram in Udupi nearby. But his birthplace is also right near to Udupi. And there's lots of childhood pastimes and stories about Madhvacharya, mystical stories. He also had various mystic powers and did certain miracles. But because he was the son of, as the reincarnation of Hanuman, he also has the connection with Vayu. And so this ship at that time, of course, they were all sailing ships, right? There weren't any other types of ships on the ocean except who had the sails. So this ship got stuck out away from the shore. And that's a big calamity sometimes, you know, the ships, if they get stuck on a sand dune or whatever, with big waves coming, they can get destroyed and people can die. So they were some distance out and Madhvacharya was on the shoreline and they were all calling, help, help, help. So then Madhvacharya, he called out to them and told them to do such and such with the sail, this and that. And then he arranged for the wind to come and dislodge them. And then they were able to get freed. And when they came to shore, they were so thankful to Madhvacharya. They didn't know who he was. Obviously, he's a saint, sannyasi. He took sannyas at the age of 8 years old, by the way. Yeah. So anyway, they told him that, please, come onto our ship and we have so many goods and everything. So please take whatever you want. So Madhvacharya came and he saw these huge chunks of gopi chandan, the same that we use for tilak. And he said, yes, this is very useful because we are always using this daily. So I will take this. And they were very, very heavy, gigantic, like a boulder. It took a number of men to bring it off of the ship onto the shore. And then Madhvacharya raised it up all by himself and began to carry the boulder on his shoulder. And then suddenly it began to crack open. He put it down, and as it cracked open, there was Udupi Krishna deity. And guess who worshipped that deity 5,000 years, or at that time 4,200 years before? Rukmini in Dwarka. And the story is that, when Krishna's Dwarka Leela was going on, the queens and Mother Devaki, and they would hear from Rohini Devi, because she was there in Braj when Krishna's growing up. So she would tell all these pastimes to them, how sweet was Krishna's childhood pastimes, because Mother Devaki didn't see them, right? So one day, Krishna was there in that assembly, and Mother Devaki said, oh, I am so unhappy. I'm so unhappy, so distraught. I never saw your childhood pastimes. I never saw that beautiful form of your little Gopal form. I so much want to see them. So Krishna, he said, oh, don't worry, mother. I'll show them to you. And then Krishna manifested his little child form, and all of them were completely captivated by his beautiful, sweet child form. They were stunned in ecstasy. And then Krishna began to do certain like playful activities, and he climbed up on the lap of Devaki and smeared some butter on her cheeks, and all of this is going on. And then he again manifested his normal form, Dwarkadish form. And at that time, they were just overwhelmed. They were all weeping and overwhelmed. And then Rukmini said, I want to have a deity form exactly of how you looked when you manifested your form. And I don't know exactly who made the deity. Perhaps it was like Vishwakarma or one of those demigod kind of personalities. But that form was carved, and of the usual black stone, of those old ancient deities. And it's a form of Krishna standing up as a young boy, and he's holding on to a churning stick that is used to churn the yogurt into butter. That's what he has. It's kind of tall, like it's kind of like the churning stick comes up to his shoulders, and he's holding on to that. That's his form. So that very deity was worshipped by Rukmini Devi, and then over the centuries, literally more than 4,200 years, 4,200 years later, that somehow or other that deity became lost and was inside of a Gopi Chandan. And Krishna came directly to be worshipped by Madhvacharya. So Madhvacharya, when he saw this deity form, that he carried him 11 miles from the shore of the ocean to Udupi, which was like a village at that time. And he composed as he was, because Madhvacharya was such a great scholar, incredible, powerful scholar. And he composed beautiful poetry praising that Udupi Krishna along the way. So that temple, what was established was actually Madhvacharya. He did not want to have any competition with the other very prominent ancient temples in South India, like Sri Rangam, Ranganathji, and Tirupati. And he didn't want, so he built a small temple. He built a small temple for this deity. There's a pond next to it. And he established the deity worship there. And also, Madhvacharya, he established a line of sannyasis, and they have very, very strict rules of who the next person in line will be, And there were 8 sannyasis. He established 8 sannyasis. And since 800 years before, those 8 sannyasis, they also built their own dwellings around this temple. And to this day, there's a courtyard, not courtyard, what do you call it? The temple's in the middle, and then there's this road that goes around in a quadrangle, and there's shops and everything on both sides, but the temple is at one end of it, and it actually goes around the temple. So in that courtyard, which is not very big, how big is it? Looks like it's maybe 1 acre, that size. And every night, the deity is taken on a big, huge chariot that they have standing next to the temple, a very South Indian looking style chariot. that deity never comes out of the temple, but they have a Vijaya deity, an expansion, and that deity is brought out. Then there's this procession that goes every night with kirtan and everything all the way around.
So exciting.
Yeah, and another thing about that deity is that they never put him to sleep. Maybe they put him to sleep, but he's never inaccessible. At any time of the 24 hours, even at night, there is a window. That's actually how you take darshan. It's not like an open deity. There's a window. I think it has some bars, and people have to stand in line, and then you get to take darshan of the deity. And if there's a lot of people, then they try to move you along, because it's a very small interior of the temple. Small. Maybe it's about like the size of this part of this house, from that wall to this wall and this. The actual temple area inside, and then there's some little elevated platform you can sit there. And the Westerners are completely, there's no restrictions or anything. And they always have some kind of kirtan, some kind of puja going on, festival after festival all year long. So what happens is, those 8 sannyasis, they have their own temples. It's like big houses, multi-story houses, and that's their mutt. So there are 8 temples and 8 mutts, right? And what happens is that there's a system of serving the deity for a period of something like 2 years, I think it is. Each mutt, the chief sannyasi of that mutt, who's kind of like the acharya, and he also has a in-training sannyasi from boyhood that they're training to be the next person in line. And that's been going on for 800 years, completely according to the standards that were set, And they have their own deities, that were established. I don't know if they were established at the time of Madhvacharya, but I think so. And those deities that they have, they bring, when it's their turn to serve the deity, the Krishna deity, they bring their own deities into the temple, and it's in the temple room where the deity is. No one goes in there except those who are pujaris, and the only way you see the deity is through that window, And so they have what they call pariyaya, which happens every couple of years, where there's a switch. There's going to be a change to the next of the 8. So literally they have to wait, what?
14 years?
Yeah, something, 16, about 16 or 14, no. Yeah, maybe 14 years, right? So when I was there, Bhagavad Maharaj was there and a few other devotees, because Udupi is also the place where all the devotees go to get panchakarma. It's a very beautiful town. They have a beautiful college, university, hospital, campus, very clean, very almost Western standard, you could say. Then there's a whole Ayurvedic clinic, and then there's other Ayurvedic clinics. And it's also beautiful, warm weather down there. In the middle of the winter in Vrindavan, when it's cold, then you can go there, and it's beautiful weather all through the winter.
Sounds very attractive.
Yeah. Plus, you can go and bathe in the ocean. You just get on a bus. They have good bus systems there. So a lot of devotees go there in the winter, and they do the panchakarma. But the winter that I was there to do panchakarma. Bhagavad Maharaj was there, his son Nishringa was there, and a bunch of other devotees from our Sangha, and also other devotees from ISKCON. And that very year was the pariyaya, right? And there's one particular sannyasi who was doing it, I think, for the 5th time in his life. He's very old. He was in his 90s. And obviously he was probably not going to last much longer, so that would be the final. And everybody in the town knew him, the whole town. They even have Muslims and Christians down there. But they all kind of celebrate the Krishna deity, That's a unique thing about Udupi. And so they had a big festival. And, lots of prasadam being distributed, and so many festivities while we were there. Crowds and crowds of people came. And they had billboards with the picture of that sannyasi all over the place, and, congratulations. Some company was, hosting that billboard, congratulations for the 5th pariyaya, like that. So that's my experience with Udupi and Srimad Vacharya's line. Yes, so let's read what Srila Bhaktivigyan Bharati Maharaj is telling. He tells a little bit about the birth and childhood pastimes, but in the other thing that I downloaded, it tells even a bit more. So he says, today is a very special day. It is the disappearance day. Of course, for us, it's the appearance day of Sri Madhvacharya. He was also known as there's two other names that he was known by. One was Ananda Tirtha, and the other was Purna Pragya. So, his birth and his childhood pastimes. Externally speaking, Madhvacharya appeared in 1238 AD. So, it's about 800 years now. In 2038, it'll be 800 years. So he appeared near Udupi in Pajaka Kshetra to Sri Narayan Bhatta, who's also referred to as Madhya Geha and Vedavati. That was his mother and father, Narayan Bhatta and Vedavati. Madhvacharya's family was poverty-stricken, and before him, all his siblings had passed away prematurely. So thus, in order to beget a healthy child, Vedavati observed a strict vow of sustaining herself only on milk for 2 years. And as a result, she was blessed with Madhvacharya as her son. Their family's worshipable deity was Sri Ananta Padmanabha, holding a conch, wheel, club, and lotus. And so, his father named Madhvacharya Vasudev. That was his childhood name, Vasudev. In reality, he was a Shakti Avesh avatar, a personality empowered by the Lord to accomplish a certain task. Being an incarnation of Bhima and Hanuman, he displayed many feats of strength and mystical perfections. As a child, while playing in a nearby forest, Vasudev killed the snake demon Maniman by crushing him with the big toe of his left foot. And actually, in another thing that I was reading, that snake bit him. It's a poisonous snake, but it had no effect on Madhvacharya. Yes. So Vasudev's father, he had accrued some debt from his brother. As a result, Vasudev's uncle showed up one day demanding his money be returned, and he threatened to give up his body by fasting to death unless his father was able to return it. So to settle the debt, Vasudev converted some tamarind seeds into authentic coins, and he addressed his uncle, "You please take the requisite coins and settle your dues." As a 5-year-old, I want to say add one more thing here in between. You know, the mother of Madhvacharya, there was an incident where there was some crisis that was happening. And Madhvacharya was very far away, like a few miles away, Madhvacharya was. So then she was calling out for him, even though he was very far away. She was in some distress. I don't remember the exact detail. But he leaped. He jumped all the way from there and appeared right in front of his mother. And when you go to his town, like, it's told here, it's right near Udupi, you can see that very place. There's like a shrine there. And, the mutts of the sannyasis, they've also established a temple there at his birthplace. So as a 5-year-old, he proclaimed to his father, I will refute the philosophy of Shankaracharya. His father was elderly, and he used to carry a walking stick. He said, Shankaracharya is Lord Shankar himself. And if you are indeed to refute his philosophy, then the stick I am holding will turn into a fruit-bearing tree. So here's the father saying to his 5-year-old child, you're going to refute the philosophy of Shankar. He's Lord Shiva himself. You're going to refute that philosophy? Oh, if you are really going to do that, then this stick that I'm holding, my walking stick, it will turn into a fruit-bearing tree. Straight away, Vasudeva planted that stick into the earth, pronouncing, O stick, if I can refute Shankar's philosophy, then immediately become a fruit-bearing tree. Vasudeva's words came to pass, as the stick instantly grew into an Ashvata tree, a sacred fig tree, and bore fruits. Seeing this, his father was astounded and convinced that indeed his son was not an ordinary personality. Once a famed wrestler challenged him. So Madhvacharya firmly placed his big toe on the earth, and he invited the wrestler to try and lift it. But despite exerting great force, the wrestler failed. He actually had a number of incidences like with wrestlers. There's another one I heard of. This one's really wonderful. I actually told this in front of Gurudev when we were celebrating Madhvacharyas, and I had read this, because there's a very nice book produced by one ISKCON devotee, and it's all about the life and pastimes of Madhvacharya. So I had read a lot of different incidences, and then when Gurudev told me to speak, I mentioned this, and Gurudev laughed when he heard this. So what it is that Madhvacharya challenged these wrestlers, a number of them, like 5, 6 of like the huge, strong, powerful wrestlers, And Madhvacharya challenged them to come and choke him and stop him from chanting the holy names. So they came and surrounded him, and with all their might, they're trying to choke his neck. And he's chanting. And they could not affect his chanting. They were defeated. Gurudev laughed when he heard that one. Now is the pastime of finding the Udupi Krishna deity. Once a merchant ship fully loaded with cargo was stuck and unable to move. Madhvacharya was nearby at the time, and using just a few gestures, he managed to bring the ship safely to shore. The captain was very much appreciated this timely help and offered Madhvacharya anything among the precious items that they were carrying. Madhvacharya told the sailor that he would like to take some of the gopi chandan because it was an item of daily use for him and his disciples. Out of many blocks, Madhvacharya chose 2. The captain happily gifted the gopi chandan to Madhvacharya. While he was carrying them, one block of gopi chandan broke open, and a beautiful deity of Gopal holding a butter-churning rod in his hand appeared, which was installed by Madhvacharya in Sri Udupi Kshetra. This deity is not the form of Ladhu Gopal. It's not Ladhu Gopal crawling. Yeah. By the way, because it said he got 2. He got 2 blocks. You know what was in the other block? Balaram deity. Wow. And that Balaram deity is installed on the ocean front in a small temple.
Separate from the Krishna?
Yeah. Yeah, he's installed there on the beach, on the ocean front, in a small temple. So, there is one unique feature of the temple, Madhvacharya's temple for the Gopal. Sri Gopal is not put to rest, Shayana. He's not put to rest by closing the temple door. The window to the deity room always remains open, so anyone can have darshan of the Lord at any time. Madhvacharya established 8 mats and made his 8 prominent disciples in charge of those mats as acharyas. Today, acharyas in the disciplic succession of all 8 prominent disciples, they take turns to serve the main mat. Sri Krishna Mat, it's called the Sri Krishna Mat, that's the name of it, for a period of 1 year or a rotational basis, and it's actually 2 years. They follow very strict standards of worship to this date. There is also a sacred pond in the Mat premises. No one is allowed to use the pond to wash their hands or feet, as the water is used for cooking for the Lord. Once, while Madhvacharya was on pilgrimage passing through Maharashtra, along with his disciples, a local king was digging a big lake. The tyrannical king created a rule requiring whoever passed to participate in excavating mud from the pond. However, when Madhvacharya was confronted to take up this process, he first made the king submit to his own rule before proceeding. On Magi Shukla Navami Titi, which, while writing a commentary on the Aitareya Upanishad, he left his body. That's the short... Yeah. That's the disappearance. We're celebrating the appearance day. Yeah. While he was writing a commentary on the Aitareya Upanishad, he left his body.
It sounds like it was out of context of what came before. The king was requiring anyone who passed by to help dig. I didn't see the connection.
Yeah, it didn't tell much of the details here, but before he agreed, before he was confronted to take up this process, but he first made the king submit to his own rule before proceeding to help. Yeah. So there's so many pastimes of Madhvacharya. Let me just see here, because I did download, and hopefully, yeah, here it is. So, yes. So this is about Madhvacharya's, it's a short, like little booklet, 37 pages. Okay, and the way that it's put together is there's a question, and then there's an answer for all the different incidences of his life. So, chapter 4 is early years of sannyas. The question is, how did Sri Madhvacharya come to present a new philosophy? So, Sri Madhvacharya's guru was Sri Achyuta Preksha. Lord Sri Ananteshwar himself told Sri Achyuta Preksha, that's a deity, Ananteshwar. He told Achyuta Preksha that he would obtain right knowledge from Sri Madhvacharya, his own student. The deity told him, you will attain all correct knowledge from your student. So ever since he took sannyas, at the age of 10, Sri Madhvacharya taught others the right meaning of Vedas and how this meaning could be assimilated by praying to Lord Sri Hari. He knew this because he was in essence Sri Vayu himself, and he had learnt the right knowledge directly from Lord Sri Narayan. 40 days after taking sannyas, Sri Madhvacharya skillfully debated a famous Advaita scholar, Vasudev Pandit, that was the name of the scholar, and he defeated him. So he's like 8-10 years old at that time. Sri Achyuta Preksha was totally impressed by his pupil's victory, and he wanted him to get even better at debating. So he then started teaching him Ishta Siddhi, an Advaita philosopher's work. So Advaita philosophy, he's teaching, right, to him. Immediately, Srimadvacharya pointed out that there were 32 incorrect items in the very first sentence. Sri Achyuta Preksha asked him to show the incorrect items, and he told everyone that he would not teach anymore. From then on, Srimadvacharya started his teachings on Dvaita philosophy, Dvaita and Advaita. He also undertook a South Indian tour, and he visited Trivandrum, Kanyakumari, Srirangam, and Rameshwar to spread his ideas around. He had vigorous debates with scholars from other traditions. This tour of South India convinced Srimadvacharya that he needed to give his new Siddhanta, or philosophy, a formal basis. He started writing his first work, a commentary on Gita, soon after his return from the tour. He taught that Lord Sri Hari is supreme, Hari Sarvotama. This is telling now, what were his teachings? There's actually 9 teachings. I saw another list of those 9. Some of them are similar to our Dasmul Tattva, but there's a lot of other specific. So here they are. Lord Sri Hari is supreme, Hari Sarvotama. The world is real, Jagat Satya. Not like the Mayavadis, it's all illusion. It is real and it is not an illusion. It is not Maya, the world. There is a 5-fold difference between God, living beings, and non-living beings. So it's kind of like what we were talking about in the Bhagavad Gita introduction of Srila Prabhupada. He also points this out in his introduction, that there are 5 things, topics: Ishvara, Maya or Prakriti, and Jiva. So, and then there's that. Then there's the Sambandha Gyan, the relationship between the 3, and then there's a relationship between the 2. So it makes 5 different Sambandhas: Maya, and Jiva, like that. So there is a 5-fold difference between God, living things, and non-living things. This 5-fold difference is called Pancha Bhed. Bhed means difference. And it includes the following elements: between God and the living things. The Bhed. 5 different differences. Between God and living things. Between God and non-living things. Between living and non-living things. Amongst living things themselves. And amongst non-living things. So that's exactly the same. The 5 different Sambandha relationship. And here it's being called the differences between them. He used 3 main methods of proof, praman, to present his philosophy. So what's our praman in Mahaprabhu's philosophy?
That's more success.
No, what's the praman, the evidence?
Srimad Bhagavatam.
That's true. That's true. But the first of the Dasmul is named praman, and the other 9 things are named prameya. So praman is the proof, the evidence, to prove the other 9, which is called prameya. So there's a verse. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has written Sanskrit verses for all of the 10, Dasmul Tattva, and in the Jaiva Dharma, there's a chapter for each one, right? So the first one, the praman, trying to remember, Amnaya Praha Tattvam, Haririha Paramam Sarvashaktim Rasabdim. That's how it starts out. Amnaya Praha Tattvam. Amnaya has said. Amnaya, praha means is speaking. Tattvam, these tattvas. Amnaya, praha, tattvam. And then the list of the other 9 tattvas are there in Dasmul Tattva. So what is Amnaya?
Evidence.
Yeah, but what is that evidence?
the Vedic literature is accepted by the Charjana Sampradaya.
That's right. It's not just all Vedic literature,
Right.
but it can be called Praman because it has been accepted by the Acharyas, and therefore it's called Amnaya, specifically. Yes, so Madhvacharya used three main methods of proof to present his philosophy. They are pratyaksha, personal experience, personal perception, pratyaksha. That is one type of praman. The other is called the scriptures, the agamas, the Vedic scriptures. And the other is called anuman, inference, like analogies and so forth, and logic, anuman. So those three, he used those three to prove his philosophy. Question 2, how did he propagate his philosophy? Srimad Vacharya started propagating his philosophy, Dvaita, meaning two different things, referring to the difference between God and us. Initially, the only way of propagating his philosophy was to take on scholars belonging to other schools of thought and debating with them. In the course of the debate, the scholars would learn how mistaken they were in misinterpreting the Vedas, concluding that their knowledge about God, the world, and living things was grossly incorrect. When he debated with them, they understood they're incorrect. More often than not, they would then surrender and implore Srimad Vacharya to accept them as his disciples and to impart correct knowledge to them. In addition to his melodious chanting of the Vedas and his concise way of communicating ideas, Srimad Vacharya was a charismatic person and a natural leader. He toured North and South India, giving discourses and debating, and winning over scholars from other traditions. He debated and converted Shobhanabhatta, a scholar in the Godavari province, who became a disciple of Madhva under the ascetic name of Sri Padmanabha Tirtha. He also converted Narahari Tirtha, who was a scholar in the Orissa region. He used many down-to-earth examples to illustrate his arguments. His incisive logic and enormous learning helped him win over all opponents. His ability to defeat anybody in debate made him very popular. He was fearless, and many times he argued with groups of scholars and still was able to come on top, efficiently promoting his philosophy. He converted many of them and made them his followers. What did he do while traveling? When Sri Madhvacharya traveled, he visited temples, sacred rivers, and met scholars from other schools. He engaged them in intellectual debates, and he proved to them the error of their ways. He defeated Buddhisagara and these are two Buddhists, Buddhisagara and Vadisingha, both Buddhists. He defeated them with very concise one-sentence responses to their arguments. They ran away overnight, accepting defeat. Similarly, he argued against Shankara Bhashya. What is Shankara Bhashya? That means the commentary on Vedanta Sutra. He argued against that, saying that the world is real. It is not an illusion. God is supreme and different from living and non-living beings. On one occasion during his travel through South India, this was in 1256 to 1259, on one occasion during his travel through South India, he halted at a place called Vishnu Mangala. That was in Kerala. In order to test Sri Madhvacharya, one person gave him hundreds of bananas after lunch. Sri Madhvacharya ate all of them without any difficulty, like whole branches of bananas. Hundreds he ate without difficulty. This act resembled that of Sri Bhima in his previous incarnation, where he ate a lot of food meant for a demon called Bakasur and then killed him. He then went to Kerala and he halted near Payasvini. He reminded everybody that Sri Durga, the sister of Lord Sri Krishna, would reincarnate here. Then he visited the Sri Ananta Padmanabha temple in Trivandrum. I've been there to that temple. That's a whole story. That's the famous Padmanabha temple of South India at the tip, Trivandrum.
They name it after you?
No. So anyway, that's a whole interesting story, how I had to see the king of Kerala who lived there to get his permission to go and see the deity, because we're in Western bodies. It's a whole story, amazing story, how it happened. Because I just kept on insisting, my name is Padmanabha, and I've come all this way to see this deity, so it has to happen. And I just didn't take no for an answer. So we got the darshan, and directly from the main pujari in the temple, he brought us there, right to the front. There's long lines of people. We went through this whole palatial, because that temple is very, large and has all kinds of corridors and carvings and pillars, and he brought us right to the front for the darshan of that deity. He's lying down, Ananta Padmanabha, very big, huge deity. And then we even got directly his Mahaprasadam from his plate. Yeah. So then he visited the Sri Ananta Padmanabha temple in Trivandrum. He addressed many people in the temple and presented his Dvaita philosophy. Oh, by the way, some years later, because when I went there it was I think 2009, just before Gurudev passed away. I went on a tour of South India, the only time that I've done that. And so a few years later, it came out in the news, world news, that very temple, there were huge underground rooms that had never been opened. And they opened up those rooms, and the jewels and wealth and gold and silver, and it was the biggest find in any temple of India. Even bigger than, therefore it ranked that temple as the wealthiest temple in all of India. They likened it to billions of dollars of wealth in the form of all of that. Yeah, that temple, Ananta Padmanabha. Mahaprabhu had gone there in his travels. Yeah, he had actually gone and taken darshan there of that deity.
In South India too, obviously. When he toured South India?
Yeah. There's a place nearby to that place, Trivandrum, because that's where we were going. I was with that one devotee from Canada named, what's his name? I'm forgetting now. He had been to South India a number of times. So he invited me, let's go to South India. It was in the winter period. So we went and toured a few different places. It took maybe 3 weeks. And then in the winter, we stayed at this place right on the ocean, which was about half an hour by train from Trivandrum, called Varakala. That was the name of the place. It was a big place where a lot of Westerners would, in this beautiful weather, bathing in the ocean. So we got rooms for a week and stayed and chanted on the beach and all of that. But right near to where our hotel was another temple called the Janardhan Temple, Sri Janardhan. And it was a smaller South Indian typical temple, but very ancient. Mahaprabhu had also visited there. It's right there in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Those two places. So On one occasion, oh yeah, he gave him the hundreds of bananas and then he ate without difficulty. This act resembled that of Sri Bhima. He then went to Kerala and he halted near the river Payasvini. He reminded everybody that Sri Durga, the sister of Lord Sri Krishna, would reincarnate here. And then he visited the Sri Ananta Padmanabha temple in Trivandrum. He addressed many people in the temple and presented his Dvaita philosophy. Here he challenged Kudi Pushturu, a leading Advaita scholar, and he defeated him. In order to establish his philosophy on a sound footing, he decided to write commentaries on the Holy Scriptures. Srimadvacharya then went to Kanyakumari. And remember, this is like, he's like a young teenage boy at that point. So this is his early pastimes. Maybe he wasn't teen, maybe he was in his 20s. But this is divided into his early and also his later pastimes. Srimadvacharya then went to Kanyakumari and Rameshwar. You know what that is. That's the very point on the southern tip where Lord Ram, today is Vijayotsava day. That's where he halted with the whole monkey army, and Hanuman had leaped across and then brought back the news already, previously. Now they had all marched, and that's where they built the bridge, Rameshwara. There's a famous pastime there where there's a deity of Lord Shiva, Shiva Linga, very famous, Rameshwara. And so some persons were saying that Lord Ram, he worshipped this deity, right, of Lord Shiva. So the word Rameshwara, some persons were interpreting that this deity of Lord Shiva is named Rameshwar. So some persons were saying, oh, that means that Lord Ram, he's not as great as Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is being worshipped by him. And then what happened was the deity himself spoke. And he said, oh, my name, Ram Ishwara, it does not mean that I am the Ishwara of Lord Ram. Lord Shiva himself spoke through the deity. And he said it means Ram is my Ishwara. Yes. So that pastime is there. And it's called Kanyakumari, that final point at the southern tip. And there he remembered Sri Hanuman's incarnation. In Rameshwar, he camped for 4 months during Chaturmasya. Many scholars from other disciplines also camped there to try and defeat him. Many of them, including Kudipusturu, they formed a team to defeat him, but none of them prevailed. Then somebody challenged his statement that every name in Vishnu Sahasranam has 100 meanings. So Vishnu Sahasranam is 1,000 names of Vishnu, right? And they challenged him, because he had made the statement that every name of the 1,000 names has 100 meanings. So that's 100,000, right? So he agreed to list out the meanings, provided that the audience was able to remember them. He began with the first name, Vishvam, and he started listing its meanings. After he crossed 50, his audience requested him to stop, since they were unable to keep up with him. He also addressed another group of scholars and won their heart by using logic, Vedas, and Mimamsa. He finally returned back to Udupi. So, wherever he went, he propagated his philosophy and defeated scholars who had incorrect knowledge. This is the last thing I'll read now because we've come to the end. How did he meet Sri Vedavyas? So here's a description. Srimadvacharya decided that to protect Vedic traditions, he would have to refute existing wrong commentaries on the Brahma Sutra, Vedanta Sutra, in order to protect the Vedic traditions. He would have to refute all the wrong commentaries on the Brahma Sutra. In order to do so, he would have to write a commentary that brought out the true meaning of the sutras, along with the true import of the Vedas. He decided to go to Badari to meet Sri Vedavyas and get his blessings before writing the commentary. To make sure that his guru, Sri Achyuta Preksha, did not object to his long journey, he wrote a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. This kept his guru busy, and he accorded his permission for the trip. He traveled north. This is 1263 to 1271. That's like 8 years. He traveled north with several disciples toward Lower Badari. Badari means Badari Ashram. Toward Lower Badari. The travel was very pleasant with a symbolic cool breeze because Srimad Vacharya, Sri Vayu himself, was leading the entourage. He reached Badari and offered his salutations to Sri Narayan. He sent his disciples away, and then he presented his commentary on the Gita to God. He's saying God. This is written by some. That means Lord Narayan. He told God that he had created this commentary to the best of his capability. To this, Lord Narayan replied, "Not really. You have much more capability, but you have written only a little. You could do even more." So on that same night, Lord Narayan woke Srimad Vacharya and asked him to present his commentary again. This shows that Lord Sri Narayan was completely happy with his work, and he wanted to listen to it many times. Then Srimad Vacharya made preparations to meet Sri Vedavyas, the reincarnation of Lord Sri Hari, who was living in Upper Badari. Travel to Upper Badari is difficult even today. It could take 48 days. So he took an oath not to talk and eat until he met Sri Vedavyas. He did this in order to keep his mind focused. In order to keep his mind focused on prayers to Sri Vedavyas and to ward away distractions. He asked his disciples to stay back, and he proceeded toward Upper Badari. Everyone stayed back except one disciple, Sri Satyatirtha, who was determined to follow his master. However, after a while, he became so tired that he could neither keep up with Srimad Vacharya nor go back to the lower level. Srimad Vacharya looked back and he waved at him, signaling him to go back. This wave created a fierce wind that carried Sri Satyatirtha back to the Lower Badari camp. Srimad Vacharya proceeded towards Upper Badari, and he went to Sri Vedavyas's ashram, his hermitage. This was a beautiful forest with many trees, birds, and animals. There were many saints praising the Supreme Lord and getting lessons from Sri Vedavyas himself. Those saints saw a well-built and a charismatic Sri Madhvacharya coming towards them. They were curious to know who he was. Then Sri Madhvacharya saw Sri Vedavyas sitting in the middle of a stage. This beautiful sight moved him, and he started praying to him. He looked at Sri Vedavyas's beautiful face, hands, body, and legs. Sri Vedavyas's eyes were very bright, and he had a melodious voice. Then Sri Madhvacharya went near Sri Vedavyas, and he did namaskars to him. Sri Vedavyas was very happy to see him and greeted him effusively. This meeting with Sri Vedavyas was only possible because Sri Madhvacharya was a reincarnation of Sri Vayu, supreme among jivas, Vayu Jivotama. Then Sri Vedavyas taught Vedas and Bhagavat to Sri Madhvacharya. As Vayu, he had already been imparted knowledge of the scriptures by Narayan. However, he learnt them again from Sri Vedavyas for several reasons. Foremost among them was his obvious pleasure in learning something from his Lord and Master, and second, he wanted to emphasize that true knowledge has to be learnt from a guru. And third, he wanted to show the world that his knowledge of scriptures was flawless, because this had been imparted to him by the Lord Sri Hari himself. Gaur Premanand. So
Very
wonderful,
sweet.
huh?
Very sweet.
Yeah. So just Lord Ram's victory also today. Some people say that the Ram Vijayotsava day is the day that Lord Ram started with his army to go and defeat Ravana, right? But Srila Bhaktivedanta Bharati Maharaj told, no, this is the day that he actually killed Ravana. This is the day.
That's Ravana's disappearance day.
Yes. And so our dear godbrother Srila Swarup Damodar Goswami Maharaj, such a servant of Srila Prabhupada. And I stood in front of him when he was seated just before he was placed in Samadhi at Radhakunda. I saw him after he had been for a few days already from leaving his body. They had him sitting in a lotus posture just next to the pit. He was like elevated. And I came up and I was like this far. And I'm looking at him. Even though 3-4 days had gone by, because there was a problem to decide where he would take Samadhi, his disciples were kind of arguing, no, you have to bring him to Manipur. We'll do his Samadhi here. And he was actually left his body in Calcutta, I believe it was. And then finally, 3 days later, I think, he was placed into Samadhi at Radhakund because he had indicated that's where he wanted to be placed for Samadhi. So I arrived at Radhakund just at the time when they were carrying him on a palanquin, circumambulating Radhakund. About halfway around, I arrived, and they brought him into the courtyard of the temple. I mentioned, I think, yesterday that, there's right on the corner of Radhakund, when you first come in from the Parikrama Marg, Govardhan Parikrama Marg, that corner, there's this temple that was built. It's small. It's like an ashram by the Queen of Manipur, hundreds of years. So he had somehow or other gained possession of that. And in the back side, there's quite a big courtyard, and that's where they built his Samadhi. So I was there when they just had the pit, and Srila Bhakti Vibhudayan Maharaj was performing the Samadhi. They had requested him to perform all the rituals of the Samadhi. And when I went up to him and looked at him, I became emotional. Because I'd always seen him in the photos and the videos, and also in India during Prabhupada's, festivals and stuff. And then after, for so many years, I would see him now and then, and he was always a very kind of quiet person, But prior to his leaving this world, I heard recordings of songs that he would sing, and he was sending these to his disciples. And I was in Singapore, and I heard this. He was sending these to his disciples. And when he was singing, he had a very high, it almost sounded like a feminine voice with great emotion singing. And I was struck by that, actually. And what was he singing? He was singing very beautiful verses and shlokas in a very melodious voice that were from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, very rasik, very high-level prayers and poems and all of that. He was singing. So I understood there's this other side of him, And so when I saw him there, just as, the Samadhi was being done, or just being started, I went up to him and I looked at him. You know, his eyes were closed, but he didn't look, you know, the body didn't look any. It was completely loose, you know, not hardened. And it looked like he was in some trance. And then I remember looking at him and saying, wow, my dear godbrother, you did it. You did it. You served our Prabhupada and you attained perfection. I felt that he had attained perfection, you know. So his samadhi is there, and whenever I've gone, I've always gone and paid obeisance. He's there, because it's just at the beginning of the parikrama going around Radhakunda. So we all know, we're all from the old generation, we know how he served Srila Prabhupada and how he became the object of Prabhupada's great, great affection. And Prabhupada used him as a sounding piece to defeat all the scientists, you know, which is such an important part of Prabhupada's preaching mission, you know. So all glories to our most beloved and worshipable godbrother, Sri Swarup Damodar Goswami Maharaj.
You were probably, okay.
How long ago was that he passed away?
It was after Gurudev, it may be around, I think it was around 2011 or 2012.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were probably there on this occasion, but he came to speak in front of Gurudev.
Yes.
And he
That's
said, you helped us so much when Prabhupada left.
Yeah.
I wish you could help us again.
Yeah.
Very beautiful.
For Gurudev appreciated him.
Yeah.
He did. Real Vaishnava. And you know, Rishabdev Prabhu, he has so many stories because he was the temple president of Laguna, and that's where Swarup Damodar Maharaj joined. So he has so many stories. And he told the other day before, said, oh, I won't be here on his, you know, disappearance day. I said, well, but when you come back, then you have to tell. So we'll hear some more from him. So we had a bit long today, but after all, I mean, what else are we supposed to be doing? Gaur Premanande, Shri Bhakti Swarup Damodar Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai, Shri Ram Vijayotsava Ki Jai, Shri Madhvacharya Transcendental Appearance Day Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavajai Namo Nama Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So wait. Yesterday I tried, but again, it didn't come. I know. But so now, Where's the thing? Oh, finish. Okay, so we press finish.